Have you ever stopped to think that it's possible to be alive and yet spiritually asleep? My name is Sarah. I am 38 years old, a mother, a worker. I attended church, and until recently, I would have said with conviction that I was right with God. I believed, I prayed, I knew the right words, I knew how to behave spiritually. But all of that crumbled the day I died. My heart stopped for a few minutes, my body was left behind, and I remained conscious, lucid, going through a near-death experience that exposed something I had never had the courage to face. Outside my body, without distractions, without routine, without masks, I realized something frightening. I wasn't distant from faith, I was asleep inside. My spirituality functioned on autopilot, comfortable, quiet, without vigilance. And what's most disturbing is that before that moment, I thought this was normal. While doctors tried to revive me, I began to understand that death is not the end, but it's also not the greatest danger. What was shown to me there wasn't just about the afterlife, but about the way many of us are living now. And it was in that instant that reality began to open before me. First, I need to tell you what my life was like before that near-death experience, because this is where many people will recognize themselves. I woke up early, took care of the house, work, responsibilities, and in the midst of all that, I fit God in. I prayed when I could, gave thanks for good things, asked for help in difficult moments, and moved forward. I believed in Jesus, talked about faith, knew verses, attended services, but all of this happened automatically, almost like a learned habit. I didn't feel distant from God. On the contrary, I thought everything was fine. But looking back now, I realize my spirituality was too comfortable. I didn't watch my thoughts, didn't examine my heart, didn't notice how much routine had anesthetized my spiritual sensitivity. It was like living spiritually on silent mode. I smiled, worked, solved problems, but inside, something was asleep. And what's most dangerous is that nobody warned me about this, because on the outside, I seemed fine. Maybe you live this way too, believing that being busy, tired, and distracted is normal. I thought faith was occasional presence, not daily surrender. I thought being spiritually alive meant not doing anything too wrong. I didn't notice the signs, didn't feel urgency, didn't feel spiritual hunger, and that never scared me. Until the day my body stopped and everything I had been ignoring began to slowly reveal itself. It was in this state of apparent normalcy that something unexpected began to happen inside me, silently. The day everything happened started like any other, and that's what scares me most when I remember it. There was no warning, no strange sensation, no movie-like premonition in the morning. I woke up, followed my routine, took care of small things, and thought it would be just another ordinary day. It never crossed my mind that I was about to die. My body seemed normal, my mind was occupied with simple tasks, and my faith, as always, was there, silent, settled, without questions. Then, suddenly, something changed. First, it was a light dizziness, almost imperceptible, the kind we ignore. I thought it was fatigue, low blood sugar, something common. I kept moving, trying to maintain control, but my body began to respond in a strange way, as if it was no longer completely mine. My heart accelerated and then failed, as if it lost its rhythm. Air didn't seem to enter my lungs properly. I tried to support myself, I called for help, but my voice didn't come out as I expected. It was fast and slow at the same time. 1 second, I was there, trying to understand what was happening, and the next, my legs no longer supported me. I fell, without strength, without resistance, feeling everything darken around me. There was no immediate pain, just a deep sensation of disconnection, as if someone was turning down the volume on life. While my body began to fail, something inside me remained awake, alert, conscious. Even without understanding, I felt that this wasn't just feeling unwell, it was the beginning of something much bigger, something I never imagined I would experience in that way. When everything went completely dark, I thought I had blacked out, but that's not what happened. Consciousness didn't shut off. On the contrary, it became clearer than ever. It was as if I had awakened inside a living silence, deep and conscious. I didn't feel my body, didn't feel weight, pain, or breathing, but I thought, remembered, perceived every detail, and this lucidity shook me the most. I understood I had died, not because someone told me, but because it simply made sense. There was no panic, there was a strange certainty, calm yet unsettling. Then I felt something pulling me, not with force, but with authority, as if I was being removed from a place where I no longer belonged. It wasn't going up or down, it was separation. Then suddenly I saw. I was above the environment, observing everything from an impossible point. I saw people running, heard confused voices, someone calling my name desperately, and then I saw my body, lying there, motionless, unresponsive. That image pierced through me in a way no words can explain. That woman there was me, but I was no longer in her. I tried to speak, tried to touch someone, tried to warn them that I was alive somehow, but no one reacted. It was in that moment I understood something that changed everything inside me. Death is not absence, it's passage. And as this truth settled in, an unexpected peace began to envelop everything, even in the midst of chaos. Along with it came a presence. I still didn't see clearly, but I felt with absolute certainty that I was not alone, and that what was beginning there was far from over. This presence didn't arrive abruptly or with fear. It was simply there, filling everything, as if it had always been. I didn't see a face immediately, didn't hear an audible voice, but I felt something I recognized before even understanding it. It was love, but not the shallow love we learn to name here. It was a love that pierced through, that exposed, that illuminated without hurting. And before it, something began to happen inside me. Without anyone pointing fingers, without accusation, my own life began to open like a book, not in confused scenes, but in truths. I saw my spiritual routine, my repeated prayers, my comfortable faith, my automatic habits. I saw how much I said I believed but lived distracted, how much I talked about God but rarely sought Him in silence. There, in that state outside my body, during that near-death experience, it became impossible to pretend. I realized I wasn't lost, but I was asleep, spiritually sleeping. The presence made me see not only what I did, but who I had become without noticing. There was no condemnation, but there was clarity, and that clarity hurt more than any judgment. I thought being alive, going to church, believing in Jesus was enough, but there I understood that faith without vigilance becomes custom, and custom becomes distraction. Death showed me something life had never stopped to show me. I was alive on the outside, but spiritually anesthetized. And as this awareness deepened, I felt that presence wanted to show me more. Not about the beyond, but about the now, about the silent danger of continuing to live that way without truly waking up. It was then that the focus stopped being just about me and began to expand. The presence guided me, not with words, but with direction. And suddenly, I was no longer just observing my own story. I saw other people, ordinary people, people I would easily recognize in daily life, workers, mothers, young people, elderly people, people who said they believed, who talked about God, who even considered themselves spiritual. But there was something common among them that caused me deep distress. They were alive, active, busy, and completely distracted. I saw hearts functioning on autopilot, faith mixed with routine, spirituality treated as a social habit. They weren't bad people or rebels. They were tired people, settled, asleep. I saw people trading silence for noise, prayer for haste, presence for information. I saw people full of religious content but empty of intimacy. That scared me more than death itself, because there I understood that the greatest danger isn't denying God, it's believing everything is fine when it's not. The presence made me feel the pain of a love that calls and isn't heard, that warns and is ignored. I realized that awakening wasn't just for me. The near-death experience wasn't showing me only what exists after life, but the risk of going through your entire life without truly waking up spiritually. And as this perception grew, something inside me began to move, as if that revelation was preparing the ground for something that still needed to be said, something that could no longer be ignored. As all of this unfolded before me, I began to feel a different weight, not of fear, but of responsibility. It was as if that near-death experience was pushing me to an internal limit I had never crossed. I realized it wasn't enough to see, understand, or feel. There was something that needed to be confronted. The presence remained there, firm and loving, and without saying a word, it made me face a question I had always avoided while alive. What would I do with this afterward? I felt that many want to know what happens after death, but few want to hear what death reveals about life. In that state outside my body, this became too clear. Jesus wasn't showing me scenes to impress, but truths to awaken. I understood that continuing to live the same way after dying, even having returned, would be wasting everything. The comfortable faith I carried wouldn't survive that lucidity. Either I woke up for real, or all of that would have been in vain. And what struck me most was realizing that awakening wasn't something grandiose or mystical as I had imagined before. It was simple, painful, and daily. It was stopping hiding behind beautiful speeches and facing your own heart. I felt that many people ask for signs, experiences, proof of life after death, but when they receive a real call, they run. And there, at that threshold between death and life, I understood that spiritually awakening means losing certain securities, certain comforts, certain excuses. As this understanding deepened, something began to change around me, as if time was starting to move again and a silent choice was about to be placed before me. It was at this point that I felt something pulling me back, as if two realities were beginning to overlap. The presence didn't move away, but the environment around me began to change. The peace continued, but now mixed with a silent urgency. I realized that state outside my body wouldn't be permanent. The near-death experience wasn't a place to remain. It was a threshold, a passage. I felt my body in the distance, heavy, dense, almost forgotten, and at the same time understood there was something unfinished. It wasn't fear of returning, it was resistance. After seeing with such clarity, returning to ordinary life seemed strange, almost unfair. I didn't want to wake up to the same rhythm, to the same distraction, to the same automatic faith. And it was in this conflict that something became very clear inside me. Returning didn't mean continuing. Life after death hadn't been revealed to comfort me only, but to transform me. I felt that if I returned, it wouldn't be possible to pretend nothing had happened. The presence made me understand that spiritually awakening has a cost, and that cost begins precisely when you return to the body, to the world, to people who are still sleeping. While this perception was settling in, sounds began to emerge, distant, muffled, like voices calling, machines beeping, hands touching my body. The sensation of separation gave way to growing pressure, as if I was being fitted back into something that no longer seemed completely mine, and even without wanting to, I knew the return was happening. The return was abrupt, uncomfortable, almost violent. There was no smooth transition. It was as if I was pushed back inside something too tight. Air entered my lungs, burning. My chest hurt, and the weight of the body fell on me all at once. Sounds became too loud, lights too bright. Everything seemed exaggerated, confused. I heard voices, felt hands, someone saying I had come back, but it took a while until I could understand what coming back really meant. I was alive again, but not in the same way. Inside me, something had been left open. Even lying down, weak, with my body responding slowly, my mind was awake like it had never been before. I knew I had crossed through something real, something that didn't fit into medical explanations. While people celebrated the fact that I was alive, I tried to process what I had seen, felt, and understood. The near-death experience didn't end when my heart started beating again. It continued echoing in every thought. I looked around and everything seemed the same, but I wasn't. The feeling of being spiritually asleep now caused me deep discomfort, almost physical. It was impossible to return to the previous anesthesia. I noticed how much we live distracted, running, surviving, calling this life. And there, in that bed, among machines and voices, I understood that awakening doesn't happen in the beyond, it happens here. But waking up hurts. It hurts because it demands change. While I tried to move my fingers, breathe more calmly, and accept that I had returned, a silent certainty began to form inside me, preparing the ground for what would come after that forced awakening. In the days that came after, the world continued as always, but I could no longer keep up with it the same way. People talked about common things, complained about routine, made plans, laughed, argued, and all of this seemed to happen on a superficial layer of reality. Inside, I was at a different pace. The near-death experience had torn off the veil of distraction, and now I saw how much we live on autopilot. I tried to return to my old life, but something in me resisted. Praying was no longer repeating words, it was necessity. Silence was no longer emptiness, it was confrontation. I noticed how before I ran from myself using tasks, commitments, even religion. Now I couldn't anymore. The awareness that I had been spiritually sleeping accompanied me all the time, not as guilt, but as an alert. I began to notice small signs, conversations, restlessness, tired people without knowing why. It was as if I recognized in them the same state I lived in before dying. And that hurt, because I understood that awakening isn't something comfortable. It's lonely in many moments. Not everyone wants to wake up. Not everyone wants to listen. The desire to simply remain silent was strong, but along with it came that same sense of responsibility I had felt outside my body. The experience hadn't been just for me. It carried an implicit calling, even if I still didn't know how to respond to it. And while I tried to understand what to do with all of that, a question began to repeat inside me, increasingly stronger, asking for a decision. The answer to that question didn't come all at once. It came gradually, like a discomfort that wouldn't let me pretend normalcy anymore. I realized I couldn't simply keep that near-death experience as a strange episode of my life and move on. It had pierced through me too much. I had seen how easy it is to live believing and still be spiritually sleeping. And this awareness began to change my simplest choices. The conversations I avoided, the silences I ignored, the truths I pushed to later, everything began to demand positioning. I understood that spiritually awakening isn't about having ready answers. It's about no longer running from the right questions. I started observing more, listening more, feeling more. I began to notice how much the world's noise keeps us anesthetized, too busy to perceive the emptiness. And at the same time, I felt fear. Fear of being misinterpreted, of seeming exaggerated, of saying things people don't want to hear. But this fear wasn't greater than the certainty growing inside me. I had come back different because I needed to live differently. Death had shown me that time isn't infinite, and that faith without presence is just habit. I didn't yet know how to share all of this, or with whom, or in what way. I only knew I couldn't sleep again. And as this silent decision settled in my heart, I felt that awakening was still far from over. A call to awaken. If you've made it this far, it's because something inside you also stirred. Maybe you felt a discomfort, a tightness in your chest, a silent identification you can't explain. And that's exactly why I ask you, don't let this moment pass without responding to it. This isn't just a story, it's a mirror, and what you do with what you saw in that mirror matters. I came back from death with a message I can't keep silent. We are living spiritually asleep, and we don't even realize it. We call distraction normal life. We call routine faith. We call survival purpose. But death showed me that none of that holds up when the veil falls. And the scariest part isn't what happens after we die, it's what we're missing while we're alive. So I'm asking you, will you wake up? Or will you close this page, return to your routine, and pretend everything is fine? The choice is yours, but know this: once you see, you can't unsee. Once you hear the call, ignoring it becomes a decision. Wake up before it's too late.